Welcome to the show. Well, tonight the Prime Minister tells another falsehood about China's attack on one of our helicopters, about its government's reaction.
We have made very strong representations at every level.
Completely false. And wait until I tell you what Foreign Minister Penny Wong has been up to while China shoots flares at our chopper. Also tonight, ABC staff forced to go broadcast this week from Western Sydney to get them out of their woke bubble. Has it worked, or is this another con to fool Conservatives? Plus, Prince Harry snubbed by his father, and a Sydney library bans a book on same-sex parents, saying its locals are too conservative. And yet another plan to lock up our forests for cultural reasons, even ban you from walking your dogs there. But first, a story, and some footage, by the way, that you'll find hard to believe. It's a story that again makes me wonder, what's the Immigration Minister actually doing? The hate preachers is letting in this time. What's the Education Minister doing with hate preachers on our campuses? Even now, a man charged with kidnapping and threats to kill, harassing Jewish students. And the Prime Minister as well. What is he up to? Now, caution, some upsetting footage coming up. Anthony Albanese has been telling us we've got to turn down the temperature, all this disharmony. In fact, he's even tried to ban Twitter, or X, from showing that footage of a Christian bishop being stabbed, allegedly by a Muslim youth. And you remember how Albanese justified that? He slammed Twitter boss Elon Musk for fighting against this censorship.
That this billionaire is prepared to go to court fighting for the right to sow division.
Okay, we must not have foreigners sowing division. Unless, of course, it's this guy, British Muslim political commentator and rabble-rouser Sami Hamdi, who told Muslims to celebrate October 7, when Hamas terrorists killed 1,200 Israelis, raped women, beheaded men, shot children, tortured and kidnapped. These terrorists, he said, are not victims.
Celebrate the victory. Allah has shown the world that no normalization can erase the Palestinian cause. When everybody thought it was finished, it's roaring. How many of you feel it in your hearts when you got the news that it happened? How many of you felt the euphoria? Allahu Akbar. How many of you felt it?
Now, this is the man the Immigration Minister has just waved into Australia, where he's now preached to students at Sydney University, telling them not to stop their intimidating protest.
They want you to pack your tents and go home. Tell them and roar, we're not going home until Palestine is free. Roar.
And the students he inspired chanted for the total destruction of Israel, the world's only Jewish state. But this Sami Hamdi has also lectured in Brisbane. He's lectured in Melbourne in a tour sponsored by a local Muslim charity. He's lectured even at the University of Adelaide's Bragg Lecture Theatre, an extremist that celebrated one of the most vicious terrorist attacks on civilians in our lifetime, actually preaching in a lecture theatre of an Australian university. Shame on it. But I wonder how Federal Education Minister Jason Clare explains this. Will he condemn it? And the Immigration Minister, why has he let in this hate preacher when his department stalled for months on giving a visa to Graham Linehan, the Irish scriptwriter behind the hit show Father Ted and the IT Crowd, now an enemy of the left for warning against transgender extremists? How can all this happen? And it's not as if student radicals need even more incitement to spew hatred of Israel, or Jews for that matter. Let me now show you two very disturbing examples from Melbourne's Monash University. First, an anti-Israel protester, hysterical because a Jew, or Israel supporter, I don't know how she saw him, dared to sit on the university lawn that she'd decided to liberate for Gaza. Now, just see how they tried to deafen the poor guy. Thank God for earplugs.
This man needs to leave immediately. And you people, every time you dare to show your face, you Israeli-loving genocide supporters, we will be here, we will not leave, and we will stand our ground. You are supporting the most
Well, East Monash University has called in the police to investigate that, but also on the university's campus, Monash, urging on students has been Mohammed Sharab, who a month ago was charged with kidnapping, armed robbery, making threats to kill, intentionally causing injury, now helping anti-Israel students to harass and block Jews on campus.
Israel is a terrorist state, love it or hate it. Your state is a terrorist state, and Israel is a terrorist state. And Zionism is a terrorist entity, and Zionism will vanish. And if you don't like it, go tell them.
So where is the Education Minister on that? It's shocking now what's going on, really. Yeah, universities and politicians desperate not to offend Muslim voters, Muslim students, but Jewish ones, not so much. They're desperate to placate the violent, but to move along the peaceful. Here's Melbourne University. Now occupied by anti-Israel protesters who've also chanted for the end of Israel, who've even chased their own Vice-Chancellor and set off alarms and yelled amplified chants outside his office. Again with the sirens. But when a Jewish reporter, Avi Yemeni from Rebel News, comes along, very peaceful, no abuse, just to ask the protesters questions, here's the troublemaker. A university staff swoop. Now, before I play this, I should add that I know the tall guy confronting Yemeni. We've been friends, used to work with him, and I suspect he's here having to just follow orders.
What are you doing here?
What do you mean?
Well, I know who you are.
Yeah.
You're just here to cause trouble.
Yeah. Is that a problem?
I reckon they might be.
Why are you so upset that I'm here?
Because I think you're going to incite this crowd. Pure and simple.
The Jews?
The crowd.
What do you think I'm going to do to incite the...
To you, mate. I know who you are. You're full of hate speech, so leave it at that. You're a rabble-rouser. I think you're an absolute rabble-rouser.
Okay, but so...
And you've come onto campus and you stir hatred.
What a world. Hate preachers celebrating terrorists allowed to come into the country, whip up mobs even on university campuses, use university facilities. Hate preachers allowed to occupy campuses, and a Jew is just there to bear witness. He's the troublemaker. He's causing the dissent. Out. Do you recognise this country anymore? Joining me is Wednesday regular Rowan Dean, editor of The Spectator Australia, whose coverage, by the way, in that magazine has been brilliant. He's also host of Outsiders every Sunday on Sky News at 9 a.m, also brilliant. Rowan, thanks for your time. But so this government wants to ban a video showing a Muslim boy allegedly stabbing a Christian bishop, but it allows in a Muslim who celebrates the slaughter and kidnapping and rape of Jews on October 7 and brings this message into university campuses. Explain this for me.
Well, I wish I could, Andrew. Brilliant editorial there, the last 7 minutes. You put your finger on it absolutely correctly. What we are seeing is literally a complete moral inversion that has occurred since October 7th. Now, you and myself and many others have warned about this kind of moral sort of swaying of the moral compass for the last few years. But since October 7th, it literally, the poles have flipped. It's like the polar magnet poles have flipped. And what is good is bad and what is bad is good. To have, and you mentioned he was a friend of yours or an associate of yours or whatever, but for the character there at the university to be saying to Avi Yemeni, you're a rabble-rouser, you're a hate preacher, you're a hate speaker, you're here to cause trouble. This is the epitome of the moral inversion we have seen. Now, the reality is that you've got a Muslim hate preacher coming in, you've got the government turning a blind eye to that because they are so terrified of the Muslim power in the western suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne in pulling out the Muslim vote for Labor. They're so terrified of that they won't do anything, they won't lift a finger to upset that constituency. Now, that has the knock-on effect that these characters can come out, and we've seen since October 7th this complete inversion where Israel is being accused of genocide and all sorts of things, and these idiotic school kids and university students believe that they're on the right side, the moral side. The reality being that the sorts of individuals like this preacher who get up, they celebrate and praise the events of October 7th. Now, as you mentioned, the violence, the horror of October 7th, you know, I know people are having their dinner, so I won't go into the details, but if you celebrate that, I'm sorry, you are beyond the pale. You have forfeited any sort of good character references. You have pitched yourself in with the worst of the worst. And this government, any civilized government, has at its power the ability to refuse entry to this country of people that they deem of not good character. And I would have thought celebrating those vile crimes puts you clearly in the not of good character camp, and the government has a duty, not just a preference, not just who they like politically, oh, let's let so-and-so in, let's not let so-and-so in, but a duty to protect our youth and the impressionable minds who go to universities from being exposed to what is vile, terrorist hatred and incitement. This is not a question of free speech. People keep trying to dress this up as a free speech issue. It's not. Everyone knows, it has always been known, going back to Plato or whoever, that free speech does not give you the right to incite hatred and wish death upon other people. That ain't free speech. And this is what we are looking at with the category of person who would celebrate and call for more October 7th, wish more death and destruction of that magnitude. It's vile, Andrew. And the failure of political leadership and the failure of academic leadership in our universities is a disgrace to Australia and is a blight on this nation.
Failure of academic leadership. I want to ask you about that. Adelaide University allowing this guy who celebrated a massacre in which women were raped, sexually mutilated and executed. How you could possibly justify that or celebrate it, I do not know. Allowing him to use one of its halls in an event, I should add, that's also had been officially backed by the Islamic Society of South Australia. Free speech. Look, that has its limitations. As you say, it ends where you are advocating something that could really, really hurt people. I mean, physically hurt people. Is that a triumph of free speech that the university let him do that? Or is it a failure of common sense?
Well, it's both. It's a failure of morality at the end of the day, because if you, to quote someone I've mocked in the past, but to the old, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept line, the reality is if you're giving your resources of the university, don't forget the taxpayer pays for much of this, along with the parents who pour their money into this. If you're putting those resources at the behest of someone who is out there clearly celebrating and calling for, indirectly or directly, calling for more Jews to be killed in the most appalling manner, or certainly celebrating the fact that they have been.
Well,
I'm sorry, that is
anyway.
a complete celebrating. Yes, not calling for it,
Where's
but
the
celebrating.
leadership?
That is
Rowan,
a complete failure of moral leadership.
Have they not checked? I mean, one little check. Who's this guy going to be talking there in these heated times? Oh, yeah, it's not hard to find out what he's been up to. Rowan Dean, thank you so much indeed for your time. Now, to China's attack last weekend on one of our Navy's helicopters, the Albanese government's reaction has been getting even weaker and more dishonest by the day. And I've got to ask you, where's Foreign Minister Penny Wong? I'm about to show you. Amazing. Now, last weekend, China's Air Force attacked one of our helicopters with flares in international waters while it was maintaining international sanctions on North Korea. As I said last night, the Prime Minister has been using the most incredible word games to play this down. He's called the attack just an incident. He called it unprofessional. Now, unprofessional conduct by China, like, oh, look, just sloppy procedures, an accident maybe. And he yesterday also told this falsehood about the government's complaints to China.
We have made very strong representations at every level.
And that's totally false. As Sky News' Andrew Clennell has reported, Albanese hasn't rung China's president, for instance. Penny Wong hasn't rung China's foreign minister. Defence Minister Richard Marles hasn't rung China's defence minister. The government simply complained to China's ambassador here and to some unknowns in Beijing.
Well, the ambassador has already been spoken to about this issue, as has people in Beijing.
But if you think all that's weak, check out Foreign Minister Penny Wong. Now, in the 4 days since China's attack, Wong has said nothing publicly about this foreign affairs crisis. Instead, on Twitter, she's posted how, for instance, she's tried to de-escalate the Middle East crisis, how she's talked to South American ambassadors about advancing First Nations and gender equality. She's promoted a new flight to Palau and posted about discussing the Middle East and climate change with Germany's foreign minister. She's even celebrated the return of some Aboriginal artefacts from Germany. And all that work, busy, essentially trivialities or things she can't actually influence, and not a single word about China attacking our own armed forces. It's extraordinary. Joining me are Cameron Milner, former Chief of Staff to Labor leader Bill Shorten, now Director of GXO Strategies, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Cameron, what is the government's game? Explain Penny Wong for a start.
Well, Penny's not doing a job, is she? And Penny's sort of off doing a whole lot of things to cause distraction from the core issue, which is that we have a near miss with an Army helicopter, a Navy helicopter, I should say, with flares dropped on it by a military plane from the Chinese side of things. And it's the nothing to see crew. Look, Albanese and Wong are so weak, so disgustingly weak on national security. It's terrible to watch. But lives are at risk. Men and women, servicemen and women, lives are at risk. First it was the Navy divers, now it's Navy helicopter crew. I don't want to see a loss of life, but this government is so weak when it comes to national security.
Michael Costa, give us a debate. Stick up for the government.
Oh, you can't stick up for this at all. But look, it's broader than just national security, is my view. I mean, it's since the voice that this government's drifting on a range of fronts. And I think the one that's really going to kill them is not national security, it's going to be the economy. You know, they're one rate rise away from a disaster. And who would have thought, go back to the election, that you would be facing a situation where Dutton is, winning in one state and close to being a competitive challenger. I mean, this reminds me of the fact that, people didn't take Tony Abbott seriously. Certainly Kevin Rudd didn't, and the Labor Party, and you saw what occurred there. They're of the view that somehow that because Peter Dutton's the opposition leader, they can drift away. But if the government's in drift, it's got no strategy on a range of fronts. And I think the thing that will really kill it will be ultimately the economy. And, I don't like quoting James Carville, but, it is the economy, stupid. And I think that's going to be the Achilles heel here.
Although I do think, I agree with your comments about the economy, but I do think cultural issues have become more and more to the fore over the last decade or so. And Cameron, just on that point there by Michael, a sort of sense of drift, a lack of focus, a lack of control, really. Over the last, I just think in the last couple of weeks in particular, the Albanese government, it's been so horrible for them, it could snap perceptions, cost it long-term support, make people see it for the rest of the term in a different way. There was the debacle with the immigration detainee, now accused of bashing a 73-year-old. Its reaction to this China attack, the Prime Minister being called a liar and making an organiser of a women's protest even cry. Now, your company's been involved in new polling that's about to release. Can you tell us yet what you've found?
So GXO's teamed up with JL Partners, a global polling company based out of London, to really understand what's happening in the Australian body politic. We know what the vote is. We know Albanese's numbers are tumbling. We know there's a problem. But what we wanted to do was drill into the reasons why. And the reasons, I can exclusively say tonight, are reasons you talk about nightly, Andrew, on your program to your viewers. The first thing we found was that Australians are gravely concerned about the level of high immigration in Australia. Right across the board, across the demographics, across the voting cohorts. Labor, Liberal, even Greens are concerned about the level of high immigration in Australia. And yet we don't have the government talking about that issue. We have them sweeping it under the carpet, 64% of Australians are really concerned about high levels of immigration and want something done about it from their government, and they're not seeing that. The second issue, which we've talked about, Andrew, quite a lot, is the issue of extremism. and anti-Semitism and especially Islamic extremism. Two words the Prime Minister can't say, despite the attacks, despite the jihadis being caught. Islamic extremism. Well, I can tell you tonight that we polled 2,000 Australians, a huge mega poll, and 69% of people, head and shoulders above anything else, are gravely concerned about Islamic extremism, and yet they don't see the Prime Minister talking about it. They don't seem concerned about it, and that's why, when we come to the rest of the research which we'll release, the numbers are falling for Labor. Albanese's numbers are terrible. And what we'll do as a community service is we'll release the polling to every federal MP before next Tuesday so they can read for themselves what you and I talk about and what you talk about to your viewers on a nightly basis are real concerns, and our political class aren't tackling them. Andrew?
Fascinating numbers. Michael Costa, does any of that surprise you?
Not at all, Andrew. And look, the stuff on anti-Semitism, I mean, clearly you can see that there must be some positive polling going back to the government, indicating that their position on this is, problematic. Because, I mean, the Prime Minister came out and I thought, put down one of his ministers, but obviously didn't follow through on that. So they must be getting a hint that the Australian community is not supporting the extremist Islam position on this, and these protests are part of that. But I still think that ultimately it will be the economy, and I think the interest rates are really going to be the key issue.
We polled on that too, Michael, but not for tonight.
Okay. I'll be
I look forward to it. Oh, what a teaser. Thank you, Cameron. Cameron, I think also competency and under-delivery, which, goes a little bit to what Michael's saying, is becoming a real issue for the government. The latest issue on that front is it's promised 9 months ago to ease our housing crisis caused by mass immigration by increasing the target of government-built houses to 1.2 million homes by 2029. But there's so few tradesmen to build them, the government is now in desperation decided to spend another $90 million to find them because the build so far is pathetic. Here is the Housing Minister just today.
And today was about more tradies to build more homes.
How many have you built to date?
We've built over 5,000 homes to date. We've obviously now just had the first tender round of our Housing Australia Future Fund. We're talking about, though, 1.2 million homes from 1 July.
2 years into its term, it's built 5,000 houses, just 1,195,000 to go. Will this government make it, or is this just yet another albatross around Albanese's neck?
Well, I think it's a disaster for them, and they'll never achieve this. Absolutely clear that they will never achieve their target, partly because they've got the states to deal with, they've got local councils to deal with in terms of planning issues, and there's no solution to that. Bringing tradesmen in is not going to solve this problem. It's much more complex than that, and clearly the government's looking at failure. It's going to be embarrassing to see the result in 2 years' time.
Michael Costa, Cameron Milne, thank you both very much for your time. And Cameron, no doubt we will be seeing the results of your fascinating research. I believe in the Sunday papers, but you might be lucky and get it on Saturday. Thank you so much for your time. After the break, the ABC this week sent its staff to work in Western Sydney. Oh my God, are there cappuccinos in Western Sydney? To make them see some sense. Has it worked? We'll listen in. And King Charles says no to a visit from Prince Harry. What's going on after this? And to Newswatch, look, the ABC must think we're stupid, or maybe it's the stupid one here, because for years it's been attacked for its left-wing inner-city bias, right? But instead of simply hiring a few conservative presenters to balance the absolutely 100% wall-to-wall leftist ones, ABC bosses decided, let's just shift some of our Sydney staff to a new building in Parramatta, Western Sydney. And this week was the big opening with a local Labor member, of course, plus an interview of the ABC chairman, the ABC managing director as well, by one of the ABC's most left-wing presenters. And they agreed this move was just what was needed to get that ABC staff in touch with the hoi polloi.
1 in 10 people in Australia live in Western Sydney. We need to get the ABC out and about in the community.
To connect better with the people that are living here.
And I'm guessing from what this new chairman, Kim Williams, said on this interview, that this is now like a job done. You know, they've moved the staff. Left-wing bias at the ABC, he can no longer see it. Well, joining me is Sophie Ellsworth, media writer for the Australian newspaper. Sophie, what is this all about? It seems to me a con.
Well, Andrew, this has been a work in progress for quite some years now. And ABC staffers have packed their suitcases and started heading out to the new headquarters in Parramatta. So it includes their ABC radio arm, some of their news channel and their 7 p.m. news bulletin. Now, Andrew, the whole idea, of course, as discussed there, is that it will get the ABC out into the community, resonating with more Australians and hopefully having an impact on their content. But I was looking at the annual report today, Andrew, and in their last annual report, they had 4,500 staff on their books, and about half of those, so about 2,300, are all in New South Wales. So it's still very Sydney, New South Wales focused. And Andrew, look, I hope this does result in some change and there is some more balance through the ABC, but we need to see, is it going to fundamentally change the bias at the ABC by shifting people to Parramatta? And I think there'll be a lot of people out there incredibly sceptical about this.
Yeah, they could have saved the $40 million from the move and simply employed people of different opinion. But instead they think that making them drive from Balmain to Parramatta instead of Balmain to Ultimo is going to make all the difference, Sophie, all the difference, because they might see a couple of different road signs on the way. Boy, are they trusting. Prince Harry's media spokesman, been very busy, Sophie. He's put out a public statement, has announced that Prince Harry, who's in London on business this week, the Invictus Games, is not going to be meeting his father there, the King, who's just, 3 kilometres away from where he's staying. This, unfortunately, he says, will not be possible due to His Majesty's full programme. The Duke is, of course, understanding of his father's diary of commitments and various other priorities and hopes to see him soon. Did this refusal to meet his son need this announcement from the son? It's embarrassing for Harry, but I just wonder what's going on here.
Well, the speculation, Andrew, will just continue until the public know. And look, I would say about this, it's pretty embarrassing, as you said, for Prince Harry. He's treated his family, I would argue, incredibly poorly. And what comes around goes around. When you throw your whole family under the bus, he's trashed the royal family. He's made money out of this. Now he's arrived in the UK, minus his wife, minus his children. He's not going to see his father or his brother or Princess Catherine. I mean, this is how bad things have got. This is the biggest falling out of such a high-profile family on the global scale. They can't even stand each other in a room for a few minutes. I mean, this is pretty serious, particularly given King Charles has had that battle with cancer, Andrew.
No, but I reckon, Sophie, can't stand. I'm sure that's part of it, although I think most of the animus is probably directed at Meghan Markle. But I think there's something just pretty much more media-orientated here. They know if they spend time with Harry, it's going to be used, it's going to appear in the newspapers, in the media. That's been the issue. It's the use of the media by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle that means you can't say a thing in their presence. No trust, and therefore don't have them near you.
Well, that's right, Andrew. I mean, why not make a Netflix series again? Why not put out another book trashing the family and trying to make money out of this? But I would argue their business model is running out of steam. People know his story now. He plays the victim. He's made money out of that. But there's only so much the public can hear. We know that he's always, poor Harry. And I don't think if he put out another book, I don't think it'd do very well, nor would another Netflix series.
Yes, I would suggest to Harry that the quickest way to see his father again and his brother is to divorce. Sophie Ellsworth, thank you so much for your time. After the break, Victoria's Labor government tries to lock out even dog walkers now. Who's thinking of that? Locking even dog walkers out from a huge slice of the state. And again, for the cultural reasons that are now racially dividing Australia. Yet more of our own country is being closed to us for cultural reasons. Now, this time the Victorian government wants to, or is planning to, severely restrict use of huge state forests in Gippsland. So people can't even walk a dog in some of that. And it's not just for green reasons, as I say, cultural ones as well. Decided by a so-called eminent panel for community engagement. 5 people, 3 of them identifying as Aboriginal. Now, if this panel gets its way, no more dog walking, no firewood collecting, only restricted camp, no 4-wheel driving in these areas. Now, the Victorian government had earmarked around 400,000 hectares of state forests around Merbau North and Strathbogie Ranges, that's to the east and south of Melbourne, to be rezoned as conservation parks and cultural reserves. Cultural reserves now. And it said, don't worry, we will consult the community. Really? Last month there was indeed a community consultation meeting in Druin. But what a farce. The community was there, but the panel wasn't. The people who turned up had to write their thoughts on little sticky notes and place them around the room. The room itself was in a tennis club building so small that it could only fit a quarter of the people who turned up at a time. And whether the panel ever got to read all those sticky notes, what do you reckon? Who'd know? Joining me is One Nation Victorian candidate Warren Pickering, who was at this meeting. Warren, good to see you. What exactly is going on here?
Yeah, firstly, good evening, Andrew, and thank you for having me. So as you alluded to, this eminent panel is the claims to be independent is actually hand-selected, in my opinion. It was to conduct a community engagement consultation process and deliver a report to the state government on the impacts of this proposal and the primary uses of these regions. So,
and what's got your interest in this issue, Warren?
My interest, I live in this region and I utilise this particular bit of land, the Central Highlands itself, for my own recreational leisure purposes, much as everyone else that was in attendance. So
well, you mentioned the attendance. This meeting, Warren, down at the hall. I mean, those photos. I think they're from your website. It looks like a total joke. I mean, you hold a consultation meeting, you don't turn up to hear what the public want, just post-it notes. Did it sound to you like, or look to you like just a box-ticking exercise?
Yeah, look. It's quite literally a slap in the face to the community consultation process. The reality is the meetings were barely advertised. The window for submissions was inadequately short. No minister was in attendance. No local members were in attendance. No panel was present. No questions were answered, and no consultation was had.
It's incredible. Now, look, this area, right? It's a lovely part of the state. It's also had a huge timber industry. Well, it did. I mean, it's been progressively strangled. Is that what is upsetting the government? Is that what this is about? Is it something else? Is the Aboriginal issue? What is it?
I don't believe so with regard to the timber industry. I mean, they've already sufficiently decimated this industry enough. So I can only surmise that this proposal proposes something more nefarious in nature. There doesn't seem to have been a trigger point that initiated this proposal in the first place. Community members have been told that at this stage it is just a proposal, but look, after that meeting last week, everybody left believing that this was a foregone conclusion. It just feels like we're being given the illusion of choice, nothing more.
Yeah, well, we spoke to the local council yesterday. they were in the dark about these changes too. So it just seems like it's being driven through for some reason. I don't know whether it's associated at all, like the government's talking about a treaty with Aboriginal groups and all that. This whole concept of cultural zones now, it seems to me part of that kind of discussion, really. And that sounds to me like a sort of racist division of our natural heritage.
Look, it's interesting you raised that point, because having been someone that grew up in this region, I actually have very close ties and friends within the Indigenous communities out here. Everybody that I've spoken to says the same thing. They had no idea, even amongst those Indigenous communities, that this proposal was out there. They utilise this bushland for the same reasons I do, for recreational purposes, trail bike riding, four-wheel driving, hunting. So we can only assume that those that represent the Aboriginal corporations haven't really consulted those communities.
Well, I don't get what's going on, and that consultation process you describe says so much that's not good about what's happening here. It does seem like a railroading attempt. Warren Pickering, thank you so much for your time. Keep us up to date, will you? After the break, Sydney Council bans books on same-sex marriage. It seems its multicultural community doesn't want them. And let's start out in the academics pushing anti-Israel propaganda, shall we? The Sydney Council has just voted to ban books on same-sex parenting from its library. Books like this, which Cumberland Councillor Steve Christou said had particularly upset some locals in his conservative area, many Chinese and Lebanese families.
You know, you have to understand that at Cumberland City Council, about 60% of the community was born overseas. They have deep conservative values, family values, and religious values. It's not just about targeting, gay parents. They don't want any form of sexualised books.
In fact, one Labor councillor on that Cumberland Council said he'd banned the book because of his Muslim faith. It turns out, though, that Christou himself had not actually read the book he wanted to ban. Joining me, a federal Liberal MP, Garth Hamilton, and Farmer and Sky News regular Evelyn Ray. Garth, should a council be banning books like this?
Look, I'm not one for banning books. It's really not my bag. On the other side, I'm sort of for freedom of speech. I'm about empowering parents to make these decisions. But isn't this extraordinary to see a socially conservative Labor Party member, I believe, being cancelled by his own party, being jumped upon, denounced for raising these views? The side of politics has, from the left, has become all about minorities with irreconcilable differences. And they're fighting each other. And look, Andrew, my party often cops criticism for being too broad a church. I'd rather be a broad church where we can discuss things, where we don't have to kill each other's thoughts off. We're allowed to think for ourselves, than be a party that simply does not allow the other side to speak, even within the confines of its own side of politics.
Yes, it's sure a dilemma there for that for the Labor Party and that Labor Muslim councillor. But Evelyn Ray, what do you think? Do you support the ban on this book?
I just really want to highlight just how interesting this whole thing is, because, the people in power of our nation wanted a multicultural nation, and you can't have a multicultural nation that's mono-moral, and I think that unfortunately that was the pipe dream that is never going to come true. People are going to have conflicting moral standards. That's unavoidable. That means, surprise, surprise, not everyone is going to abandon their beliefs, their Bibles, and adopt a progressive definition of sexual morality. I mean, heck, that can't even happen in a monocultural nation. So if anyone's kind of upset by this, I'd just like to say, how about you take a little leaf from your own booklet and be a little bit more tolerant, because apparently that's what we're supposed to be doing in a multicultural nation. And I think what's important to remember is it's not a matter of whether we adopt a certain system, it's which one. And, it's not a matter of which legislated morality we're going to do. It's which one we're going to actually pick, because all legislation is legislated morality to some degree. And, you know, I'm not an advocate by any means by 51% means that that's moral. You know, I don't think 51% always means it's good or right, but we are in a demos society, and this is a local council, and this is what these people are paid to do, to listen to the locals. So this is what they're saying. So
but seriously,
I don't know, Andrew.
Where is this council? Where is this council dictating what people can and can't read? I mean, it's not like the book is advocating, you know, hurting people or anything like that. They're trying to decide for other people what their reading material is. No one's forcing this book on anyone. And I think for some people it might be a very helpful book. But it's up to them. If you don't like it, don't borrow it. Pretty simple. Garth, we had the Reserve Bank yesterday saying inflation was still too high, not coming down quite as fast as it had hoped, but it was coming down. You know, don't panic yet. But tell us about this graphic from Reserve Bank data. It shows the bottom line, what the Reserve Bank did predict inflation would do, and clearly lower than what the top line is, which is what inflation actually was. And then as we go on into the future, they converge very neatly. Why does this graphic offend you?
Well, look at this giant leap of faith that we're seeing from the end of December 2024 into June 2025. What we're seeing is the predicted inflation rate just being expected without anything that justifies it. And this is my issue, Andrew. I have been talking about fiscal policy, the government's spending, fighting against monetary policy, the actions of the RBA for a long time. We're finally getting economists come out and say that, have the guts to come out and say that's exactly what this government spending is doing. It is driving up inflation. And that is causing us to remain, as that graph showed, with higher inflation for longer. Now, this government has, you know, we're $100 billion above pre-COVID spending. They increased spending in the last budget since then by $209 billion. So that's all inflationary money going up. And as we come into this next budget, we already heard last week, you know, $1 billion for an American computer with an Australian-made sticker on it, $2 billion for transport in Western Sydney. There is absolutely nothing to suggest that the government spending is going down. There is nothing from the RBA about how this magical leap is going to happen in reducing inflation. And my concern, we've seen the RBA get forecasting wrong before. Maybe they're in that space again. I hope they don't.
In fact, Garth, it's the exact opposite. Look, the more desperate this government gets, the more money it will splash out. It's just it's a law of politics. You wait. The worse the polls are, the more it will spend. Iron law of labour economics. I think the Reserve Bank has been too optimistic in the past. It will probably prove to be too optimistic now, which is what that graphic shows. Evelyn, you know, I got curry from one of my panels a few days ago by suggesting we were over the peak woke period, right? I'm keep trying to justify myself. To a study, I'm amazed the activists... Yeah, well, you may be right. You tell me why I'm wrong to cling to this then. Academics, at 3 of them from Australian National University, have found that the claim that appointing more women to boards means companies make more money is actually wrong. Now, I'm amazed they dared to publish it. They found the gender of board members made no difference, and that's after studying 1,700 directors at 2,500 firms. It didn't make them better, but then again, didn't make them worse. Maybe that's the good news. What do you conclude from this?
Look, what sort of unadulterated diet of propaganda do you have to consume to imagine for 1 minute that hiring more women would actually make any kind of tangible difference when it comes to the outcome of a business? I mean, I would actually think, statistically speaking, it would perhaps cost more because women have maternity leave, women have child leave, carers leave, recreational leave, sick leave at a higher rate for obvious reasons, and rightfully so, than men do. But, you know, these are the sorts of lies that the modern feminist has sold for far too long. You know, Feminists have had equality for a very long time. What they've been asking for is special privilege. And when they can't sell that anymore, they have to lie about it. And this is just one of the great modern feminist lies that has finally been exposed. And thank goodness, go and eat your humble pie. Men and women, whoever is best for the job should get it. Out with quota once and for all. And I think best man, pardon the pun, for the job should get it.
Garth, what do you make of it?
Look, Andrew, I don't know how you can be, standing behind this sort of a clearly flawed report. It only identifies two genders, Andrew. How dare you? But slightly more seriously, look, 20 years as an engineer, I've worked with men and women across the world. Their gender had absolutely nothing to do with how good they were at their job. I think we just need to get on with things. The world's moved a long way past these decisions, as Evelyn talked about. The workplace now reflects your contribution, as we all should. Your value should be based on your contribution to society, not whether you're male or female.
Yes, I think the idea that gender, more diversity makes boards better, that's been exploded. It's just the quality of the individual. But it has enabled, that canard that you mentioned, Evelyn, has enabled a little small class of women to become professional board members, and even our next Governor-General. Evelyn Ray, Garth Hamilton, thank you both so much for your time. One last thing, right. Look, I've got to say, maybe I should end each show actually with examples of the modern Australian academic who, is furiously tweeting anti-Israel material. Who are these people? Including unfounded rumours and dodgy statistics. Well, today's example is Tamsin Philippa Page. She's a senior lecturer at Deakin University, its law faculty, who identifies as Twitter's cool queer aunt and disabled. She, her, and her writings include pieces like this. Everything that I learned about security theatre, I learned from the zombie apocalypse. Well, I believe, to judge from her tweets and retweets against Israel, there's probably a true measure of the researching. Like this retweet of a claim I discussed on yesterday's show, almost certainly false, say statisticians, that the Israelis have now killed 14,000 children in Gaza. Or retweeting this ludicrous claim that Israel killing aid workers last month was almost certainly a war crime when it was almost certainly an accident. And retweeting this fake claim that Israel secretly buried hundreds of bodies of Palestinians in a mass grave in an act of genocide after taking over the Nasser hospital in Gaza, when in fact Palestinians have been filmed, or they filmed themselves indeed, digging that very same grave in January, months before the Israelis came. So, the modern Australian academic. Are things becoming clearer now? I mean, this thing about academics, what makes them so special? They see things you don't. Problem is, that tempts them to see things that actually don't exist. As someone once said, some things are so stupid that only an academic could believe them. I might have given you some examples. Well, that's it from me. Coming up next is Sherry Markson, but for now, good night.